Hi everyone, it's Andrea from Movers and Bakers. Today I'm going to show you how you can make a pumpkin roll cake but spruce it up and make it extra special with some decorations. Let's get baking. So first of all, I'm going to make the batter for the decorations because we're going to put that on first and get that setting. So I've got some unsalted butter. Now you can put all of this in one go. I've actually missed a bit of butter. I've actually found that by not softening my butter first that I get lumps of butter, which I don't like. So I'm just going to give this a quick whiz just to soften it up and make it creamy and smooth so everything mixes really easily together with it. There we go. So that is 40 grams or 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter at room temperature. And I just wanted to soften it. To that, I'm going to add 3 egg whites, 60 grams of icing sugar. That's half a cup of icing sugar. And 100 grams or 1 cup of plain flour. I'm just going to give that a quick mix together just to combine everything, and that is my dough done. And that's all I'm going to do. You don't want to overmix that too much either. So the reason I have used just the egg whites and not the egg yolks is because I want this mixture to be as white as possible so that the colour takes really well for the dough that I'm going to be making. And now this I'm going to separate into 4 different colours. So then you just need to pile your mixture into 4 different smaller bowls or containers. I'm using ramekins. Now you don't have to use 4, you can use 3, you can use 2, you can use as many as you want. I just like the colour effect that I get if I use 4 different colours. To my 4 separated colours, I'm going to make them all different. So I have a red, a yellow, an orange and a brown. So I'm just going to use, now I always use sugar flare colours, and I like the gel colours because they give you a much stronger colour, so you can see there how it's really thick and dark. And there are my 4 colours all ready to be used. So the reason I have done this is because you can see here, it has been used, hence a little bit of bleeding. But this is just a couple of pieces of paper that I've cut out to fit in the bottom of my baking pan. And I have drawn some leafy patterns on it. So on that I'm going to be drawing using these icings that these batters that I've now done. So on top of my pattern I have to put, and it's really, really important that you do line your baking tray when it comes to a Swiss roll. It is really important or you will not get it out and your cake will just be stuck in your pan. So line it with some baking parchment and baking paper. But before that, I wanted to put all my batters into individual piping bags. Right, my colours are done and ready to be used. I'm moving my attention to my baking sheet. So like I said before, I have my pattern on a piece of paper underneath. Now, if you're brave enough to freehand it and make it up, by all means go for it. I prefer having a pattern to work with, which is why I have this here. Now I'm obviously doing an autumn themed one. You can make it whatever themed. If you want to make it Halloween, go for it. Whatever you want, this is just my version. So I've got some autumn leaves as a template, and then I've got my baking paper that's going on top of it. Now, if I were making just a normal Swiss roll, I would likely not spray it, but because I'm doing the pattern, I want to make sure it releases really easily. I'm just going to use a bit of a spray it all down and give it a wipe off, and that is all I'm going to do. So I'm left with a really thin layer just to stop any sticking from happening with my cake. So now I'm done there, it's time for the fun bit of piping. So I've tried this a few different ways. I found that it works really well to have a couple of colours layered on top of each other. So with my piping bags, I want the hole at the end really small. You can use a nozzle. Now, what I'm going to do, it's a 2-step process, this one. I'm going to do all these outlines and pop it in my freezer for 20 minutes. And I will see you when I've got my first round frozen and ready for the next step. So the first round of my pattern freezing is done. It's been in the freezer for 20 minutes and I've just pulled it out. It means that it's all nice and firm. So when I put my filling in, it's not all going to mesh into one and become a big blob of colour instead. So before it thaws out, all I'm going to do with exactly the same batter that I used to do the outlines is I'm just going to fill it in a variety of different ways and different colours, just so you get some lovely contrasts in the outside of the cake once it's done. There we go, that's all my leaves filled in. So this is going back in the freezer, and while this is chilling out in the freezer for a second time, I'm going to make my cake mixture. Right, so while my leaves are chilling out in my freezer for the second time, the last time, I'm going to make my cake. So to start with, I don't normally do this, but I am going to on this occasion because I want to keep this cake really light. I'm going to sift together all my dry ingredients. So I have plain flour, salt, baking powder, bicarbonate of soda or baking soda, spices. I have cinnamon, ginger and cloves. I will put the quantities of all of these below this video so you can get them yourself. And some fresh nutmeg. Now I always find that nutmeg is best, you get the most flavor out of it if you have it fresh. So I will always encourage you to grate your nutmeg fresh. I'm going to grate in about 1/4 teaspoon. There we go. That is all my dry ingredients. I'm going to sift them into my bowl. There we go, that's all my dry ingredients sifted together. I'm just going to give it a quick little whisk, just to make sure everything is combined. And that is all my dry ingredients done. So those are going to get set aside for a moment. And now I'm on to my wet ingredients. So I am going to do this in a stand mixer. You can use a hand mixer or do it by hand, but doing it by hand will be very painful. So definitely do it with some sort of machinery. So in my bowl, I'm putting in 200 grams of caster sugar, and I'm going to crack in 3 eggs. I always use large eggs. Make sure as well that your eggs are at room temperature. So we'll pop that in my stand mixer, and I'm going to beat this up until it goes really pale and fluffy. Right, my eggs and sugar are really lovely and pale and creamy, you can see right there. So to that, I am going to also add some vanilla. This is a teaspoon of vanilla. And it wouldn't be a pumpkin cake if I didn't put some pumpkin puree in. Now, in the UK, you can obviously make your own pumpkin puree. I've used this out of a can, which I've just found in a supermarket. In the States, I believe that you can get pumpkin pie mix as well as pumpkin puree. Just make sure that you use pumpkin puree and not pumpkin pie mix. They are very different. So all that is going to go in. So whilst my eggs and sugar were mixing previously, I put my oven on to preheat. It's preheating at 180°C or 350 Fahrenheit. So now I've put my vanilla and my pumpkin puree in there. I'm going to give this one more mix just to completely combine those ingredients before I put my dry ingredients in as well. There we go. Now that is done, I am done with my stand mixer for now. Right, so into this, I am going to carefully put in my dry ingredients. Now remember, we have got this lovely and light and fluffy, so we don't want to lose that air, which is why we sifted these dry ingredients previously, and I'm just going to put them in very gently and fold them in to my wet mix. Once I have folded most of this in, I will just use a whisk for the last bit, just to give it a quick mix around, just to make sure I've not got any lumps of my dry mix. So now my cake mix is all ready. I'm going to get my tray out of the freezer, pop my cake in, and we're going to put it in the oven. Right, so my leaves are frozen, so I'm going to pour this very carefully over the whole thing. Now remember, when you have beaten your eggs like I have, it is going to come out almost foamy, as you can see as I'm pouring this. We're going to use every single last bit of this cake mixture, so get your spatula ready to scrape your bowl. There we go, that is all my cake mix. Now we've put all that air in by beating those eggs up, so you don't want to squish it all out with your spatula. So what you're going to do is very gently, is you're just going to guide it. Without pressing down, you're just guiding it very gently around to cover all the base of your cake tray. So I'm just going to give it a very gentle wiggle just to even the top of it out, as you can see. Now you can see the bubbles have started to come up, and that is fine. You just want to make sure the top of your cake is as level as you can get it, hence I'm doing a very gentle wiggle. So now my cake's ready to go in the oven. I'm going to pop it in there for between 13 and 15 minutes. It will be springy to touch, and it does not take long because it is such a thin cake and we spread it out. And whilst it's in the oven, we're going to prepare what we're going to do for it once it comes out. So while my cake is in the oven, I'm going to prepare what I do with it when it comes out. So because I'm going to roll it, I've got here a tea towel, just a regular tea towel, and an extra sheet of baking parchment on here. And on top of that, I'm going to sprinkle some icing sugar or powdered sugar, just going to sprinkle it all over the whole of it, and that's just going to stop it from sticking to this when I turn it out. Don't worry about this. When it goes on your cake, it won't stay on, so you won't get a white filter or anything like that. This is just to stop it from sticking and falling apart. And there you have it, that's all it is. So now all I have to do is wait for my cake to come out, which smells amazing already. Okay, so my cake is out of the oven. Oh, ouch. Right, awesome. So I'm going to turn this out onto my cooling rack to start with. So I'm going to put my cooling rack on top and then turn them both upside down. And then we'll lift the cake pan off. And you can see my pattern, how pretty it looks. Now, because I sprayed this before I did my pattern on it, this should now peel off nice and easily. Take it nice and slow. There we go. So that is going to be, let's keep that over there. That is the outside of my cake. Now, do you remember that bit earlier where I sprinkled my icing sugar onto a fresh piece of baking paper? This is going to get flipped over onto it now. So take your time and just with your hand, this takes a bit of confidence. This is the confidence in yourself bit, and we're going to flip it over onto there. There you go. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, a little bit of it did get stuck on here. That is fine. This is going to be the inside where the cream cheese filling is going to go in, so no one is going to see it. Do not panic if the same thing happens as it did for me. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to roll up my cake. So you need to make sure you do this while your cake is warm. And you're rolling it up from one short end all the way along to the other side. And then I'm going to put my tea towel up and I'm going to bring it back. There we go, and now we have this beautiful roll. This has now got to cool down completely before it is ready to ice. So this will take a couple of hours at least. So I'm just going to leave it on my cooling rack to cool down. Right, time for my cream cheese icing. This is really simple and you can make it even simpler if you want to. I will tell you how. So to start with, I'm going to put my butter into my bowl. This is 120 grams of butter. So I'm just going to give that a very quick mix just to soften it up. Because it's cooler here, I find that I need to soften my butter a bit before I do other steps. If, of course, your butter is softer than mine, you can completely miss that step out too. To that, I'm also going to add cream cheese. This is the same amount, so it's 120 grams of cream cheese. It is at room temperature. I find that if I mix it when it is from the fridge, that it's more likely to split and it doesn't work as well. So make sure you leave your cream cheese out for a couple of hours before you need to use it. So we're going to mix the two of those together until they're completely combined and really creamy and smooth. There we go, all done. And to that, I'm going to add my icing sugar. Now it's double the icing sugar to both those ingredients, so it's 240 grams, but depending on how much icing sugar gets absorbed, you might actually need to put a bit more in to get the consistency that you want of your icing. So I've got here 240 grams, and if I need to add more, I will just add spoonful by spoonful at a time. There's all my icing sugar in, and to that, before I start mixing, I'm going to add some spices. So here I have some cinnamon, some ground ginger, and a tiny little bit of cloves. Cloves can be really potent, really powerful. So I've only got a tiny bit. It's 1/8 of a teaspoon of cloves, a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. So we'll pop those in. And to all of that, my final ingredient is a little bit of nutmeg. I'm going to grate in probably about 1/4 teaspoon's worth. Now, you don't have to put these spices in. The icing is beautiful just as cream cheese, butter and icing sugar. That's absolutely fine. But I really like the extra spices in the icing as well as in the cake. Now go slow because icing sugar does fly up everywhere. So start slow, get it all combined, And then we're going to turn it up and get it really lovely and soft and fluffy. So once you've combined all your ingredients together, then we're going to turn the speed up and get this really light and fluffy. So that's taken me a minute or two to do, and you can see I've got lovely stiff icing there. And now it's time to put it on our cake. So as you spread your icing out at the end of the roll, the smallest part of the roll, you will need to just lift it to get under that little bit of the curve, just to get your cream cheese all the way to the end. Now I'm always careful with lifting it because you don't want it to crack and break off, because that's obviously going to affect the roll that you get at the end of it. Remember too that you don't need to go all the way to the end, because we're going to trim the ends of the roll off just to tidy it up. So don't worry about putting your icing all the way to the end. We're just spreading it out nice and evenly. And that is my icing done. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to roll it up, roll it as tight as you can. If it cracks on the initial roll up, don't worry, it will be on the inside, so it won't show. And there is my roll. Now what I'm going to do to help that icing set so that I can cut really nice swirls is I'm going to wrap this in cling film and pop it in my fridge for an hour or so. And when you wrap it in cling film, you'll actually find that all your icing sugar will disappear, it will get stuck to your cling film. So this will completely be clean and you will just see the cake. And that is it. So I'm just going to wrap it up in cling film and pop it in my fridge for an hour or so that the cream cheese icing sets nice and firm. And then I'm going to cut it into my slices, cutting the ends off just so you don't have that untidiness. And there you have it. That is my pumpkin roll cake done. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it if you have, and do subscribe so you can find out every time I release one. See you next time. Happy baking.